Hello, I'm Ian and welcome to my course for beginner and improver woodworkers. I know it's a big claim, but I reckon that by the time you've ended this course you'll have learnt about 85% of what you'll ever need to know about hand woodworking. And the great thing is you don't need a huge workshop, you don't need huge machines, you don't need power tools. All you need is your living room and a Workmate like the one I'm sitting on, and a selection of hand woodworking tools that I'll go through later in this session. Not only will you have completed a really nice project by the end of the course, but you'll be able to apply the skills that you've learnt to your own projects once you finish the course. And between you and me, what more could you ask for? And this is the product you're going to end up with. A spice rack made entirely of a discarded pallet. We'll take a closer look at that later. But it's an entirely sustainable end product that you will be able to make. And I'm confident about that because I've taught that spice rack project to about 300 beginner or improver woodworkers over the last 10 years. And not one of them has left my workshop without a product that they're really proud of. Before we go any further, I think it might be an idea to explain the structure of the course, and then we'll have a look at some clips from it so you can see what you're letting yourself in for. I start off by taking the pallet apart. Not a pretty sight because I haven't done it before, but I get there in the end and you will too. The next two sessions are to do with sharpening tools, and I show you how to sharpen your plane iron and your chisels to razor sharpness, because every woodworker needs to have the skill of sharpening their tools. After that, we have 4 sessions making this product, which is a bench hook. And that will teach you all the marking up skills, the sawing skills, the planing skills that you'll be using later on the spice rack, but you'll have the comfort of knowing that that product isn't ever going to be seen by anybody, and you can make all the mistakes that you need to learning those skills on a product that doesn't really matter. And then by the 5th session we start work on the actual spice rack. And I think now is probably a good time to go into the clips so that you can see some of the things that we do. The idea is that I take as much care as I can to get these boards off. So what you can do is to put a drop of oil on the stone. This is the coarse side, so I'm doing the grinding angle. Chase the drip ahead of the chisel and wait till it squidges out, and then you know that you've hit the angle. And then what you do, you tuck your elbow into your hip or into your ribs, and you work in a figure of 8, and you listen to what the stone's telling you about how that angle is hitting the stone. If you get it wrong, it won't be a nice smooth sound, it'll be a grindy sound, which you don't want. This is fractionally higher than that, so I'm going to work from this side, settle the plane on the work. I'm quite careful not to take the plane blade over that end because it'll split the wood out. It's now time for me to saw on that line, but by on that line I mean that what I'm going to do is to make a saw cut, or a kerf if you want to be posh, a kerf that just bumps up against that line. It's not actually going to be over the line, it's going to be to the waist side, the bit we're going to throw away. And then have a practice at running the tool against that edge with the spur trailing behind, not actually touching the wood. And when you're comfortable that you've got your stock against the work, you've got your stem against the work, and there's no wobble on it, just rotate that spur round so that it's dragging behind the tool, but it's marking the work, just gently. It doesn't have to be too heavy a mark. So I've settled my workpiece in the jaws. I've got a piece of MDF underneath it so that the wood won't break out when the drill finally comes out the other side. I'm going to make a mark with a scriber so that I know exactly where that hole it's got to be, and I'm going to drill through the piece of work, holding the drill so that it's absolutely perpendicular. And there are my 2 holes and very little breakout. I'm going to start this end because it's wider down this end. Now, if I'm careful, and I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to mess this up, I can line that up exactly with that mark, and I'm going to push with this thumb to stop it slipping towards me. I'm going to put my shoulder over the chisel and I'm going to rock it, making sure it's vertical until I've chopped a bit off. Then I'm going to use that as my reference to follow that line along. And I'm not using the whole chisel width, if you notice. I'm merely using about 10 millimeters. 10 millimeters at a time. And I've got enough strength to push that through the wood. And the pieces are getting thinner as I go down, but it's easy because I've already got that reference. I can just move it along the edge. This is split out a bit, so I'm going to be a bit careful there. Just take that last bit off. And that should have done the trick. Let's have a look. I hope you enjoyed looking at those clips and you feel as though you might want to start on the course. You'll have noticed that there are a lot of skills being taught. I did promise 85% of what you'd ever need to know as a hand woodworker would be covered, and you can see that a lot of ground is covered on the course. You'll also notice that there are a lot of tools used on the course, and it might worry you how much equipment you've got to put together before you can start. Well, after we've had another look at the spice rack, I'm going to talk to you about where you can source those tools for free or second hand, hopefully saving you money. Let's have another look at that spice rack we're going to be making together. The carcass, which is the frame and the 2 shelves, is jointed, and on the corners of the carcass you've got lap joints that you're going to make, and the 2 shelves are held in place with little trenches known as through housing joints. The drawers at the bottom are also constructed using lap joints, and you'll notice that I've used the best timber for the front panel of the drawer and not such good timber for the rest of the construction. The grain goes across the 2 drawers, and I probably picked the best piece of pallet wood to make the drawer fronts with because it's the most noticeable part of the construction. The drawer pulls are pine. I sourced those off the internet. You can get the same if you want to, or you can choose your own style of drawer pull. The back of the spice rack is made up of strips of pallet wood that have been thinned down to about 8 millimeters. And if you look carefully, you can see that the joins between the strips have been chamfered so that you've got a pattern emerging that makes the thing look a little bit more decorative. The finish I put on there is water-based varnish, and we'll be looking at that in one of the later videos, how to apply that. So I think you'll agree, it looks pretty good, and it certainly doesn't look as though it's been made out of mere pallet wood. What I'm going to do now is to talk a little bit about how you can source those tools, and after that I'll show you 2 tools in particular that I think you should get off eBay or definitely get secondhand, and we'll look at what you need to look for when you're buying or sourcing those 2 particular tools. Let's have a look at where you're going to get your tools from for this course. The first thing I've got to say is that I really think it's worthwhile getting second-hand tools, and there's 3 reasons for that. First of all, you're recycling a tool that exists already. You're not replacing a tool with a new product using materials that needn't have been used. The second thing is that the manufacturing methods and the construction methods and even the design of old tools are much better, in my opinion, than the modern equivalent of the same tool. And the last thing is, and call me weird, I don't know if you will, but I think that a tool has a life beyond the user, and it's really nice to take a tool that maybe a previous woodworker has used for a lifetime and continue the life of that tool by using it yourself. That might seem strange, but the second-hand tools that I've got are much more treasured by me than the ones that I bought new. Let's think where you're going to get those tools for free. I think neighbours, friends, relations often have in their sheds tools that they no longer use or bought and never used in the first place, maybe given as presents or whatever. And it's just a question of asking if they have anything that they no longer want. And if they do, then you're lucky. If they don't, nothing lost. There are also schemes like Freecycle that you can tap into, and I've got several tools over the years just by putting a post on Freecycle saying I'm looking for tools for my courses, and you might have similar success. Regarding second-hand tools, obviously car boot sales and flea markets are a really good place to look. Charity shops, not so good, because the major charities don't tend to stock woodwork tools because of their sharp edges. It's a health and safety thing, or so they say. But the smaller charity shops sometimes have tools that you can pick up. The other place that you might consider looking is eBay, but I suppose you've got to know a little bit of what you're talking about, and also you're not likely to get a bargain, but certainly for the plane and for the wheel brace, I would definitely look on Buy It Now on eBay. Your recycling centre isn't a bad place to look. My local one had a separate area for tools with the intention that people could pick up tools if they could make use of them. And I picked up several really good tools from there. They don't do it now, and maybe that's a thing of the past. But one thing that isn't a thing of the past are auction rooms. If you can go to your local auction room and have a look around for a tool chest that has ended up there, it might be that it's an absolute pot of gold if you come across it. It could have a complete set of really nice woodworking tools that will last you a lifetime, and many of which you won't know what they're for. But for goodness sake, hold on to them, because over your years, because that's what we're hoping you'll do, over the years of carpentry that you're going to have following this video, you'll want those tools at some point. Well, I hope that was useful, and to help you remember it all, what I've done is to put a synopsis of what I've just talked about on the description section below this video. So if you get to that, press the More button and it'll bring up the blurb on the course, which is on all my videos, and then underneath that you'll find a tips section, and in the tips section you'll see where to get hold of second-hand tools and also what to look out for when you're buying a plane and a wheel brace. Below that, again to help you, I've put a complete list of tools that you'll need for the course, and next to that I put a link. Now that link might take you to an eBay Buy It Now site, it might take you to an Amazon site, or it might take you to a manufacturer's site. But the intention of it is that you can see the particular tool that I've used, the particular make and model number, or if you want, it does give you the opportunity to go to that particular manufacturer or to that particular site to actually get hold of the product. I've done that on all my videos, so don't just look at the video in future, look at the description below and go to the tips, because in there I put anything that I might have missed out on the video or anything that I really want to emphasize about the video. So it's worth looking at the tips section on each of them, and I also put a list of the tools that you're going to need for that particular session, which I hope will be helpful. Now, there are two tools in what you'll need that I definitely think you should get second-hand. If you can't get them anywhere else, then please try and get them off eBay. The first is your number 5 plane. It's going to cost you about £40 on eBay. It wouldn't cost you much more if you got a modern equivalent, but To my mind, the construction and the materials used and the manufacturing methods of this product are infinitely better than anything you could get for a similar price new. The things to look out for when you're buying a plane off eBay are the tote, that's this part, the handle that you hold. Try and get one, unlike this, which has been repaired, without any cracks in it. If it's intact, it means that the plane hasn't been dropped and the tote cracked. If there is a crack in it, it's not the end of the world. You can quite easily, with a bit of gaffer tape to act as a hinge, coat it with cyanoacrylate glue, put an accelerator on the other half of the join, bring the two together so they line up exactly, hold it there for a minute, and it'll be as good as new. So it's not the end of the world, but it's quite nice not to have one with a cracked handle. You need to check that the body of the plane is not in any way unusable, and it's unusable for two reasons. First of all, it might have a crack in the casting. This is cast iron. If it's dropped, you can get a crack where this little letterbox hole is, or behind that little letterbox hole. And you want to avoid that if you, well, definitely avoid that. The other thing is that you might find that the bottom of the plane is so pitted because it's rusted badly that you'll spend a lifetime trying to get a surface back on it. And if you're going to get one, you may as well get one that's not going to take you too long to get back into condition. The thing to look out for to get the age of the plane right, this is what I always look for, is this lever here. And on an old plane that's about 30 or 40 years old, you'll find that this part, if I can get it a bit nearer, this part here is riveted onto the stem of the lever. And that's a sign that it's a tool with a little bit of history behind it. If you have a look at the wheel here that adjusts how deep the blade is sticking out of the bottom of the plane, you will find that the construction of that is much finer than anything that you can get on a modern plane. The knurling, which is the rough pattern on here, is finer on this sort of vintage model. This lever cap here can sometimes be broken, so you want to have a look and check that this is intact. And the other thing you should look out for is that the name on the plane blade or iron is the same as the name on the lever cap, which is the same as the name on the body of the plane. And if that's the case, then the plane hasn't been messed about with too much, and it's probably as it was when it was bought 30 or 40 years ago. The amount of rust, you definitely can get rid of light rusting. If it's heavily rusted, I wouldn't get it. It's going to take you too long to get it back into condition, unless you want to spend a portion of your life doing that, and it's quite a nice pursuit if that's what you want to do. So that's your plane, and it doesn't matter if it's a record or if it's a Stanley. And so a record plane you probably get a bit cheaper than a Stanley plane, but it'll be pretty much exactly the same product. And it's a number 5 plane that you're after. The other tool that I want you to get secondhand is your hand brace. Now if you've got a power tool, I won't know if you use it, and you might want to use that instead. But if we're staying true to hand woodworking, this is a tool that you want to get. It's a Stanley, this one. There isn't a record equivalent as far as I know. And it's an 803. That's the reference number for the tool. And the thing to look out for there is really only that your particular hand brace has got a crown wheel, which is the big wheel on the front there, and 2 pinions, which you can see if I hold it like that, that wheel runs against to stop it wobbling. If it's only got 1 pinion, it's probably not as good a product as this is. And the other thing to look for is that the jaws are serviceable. They're held in place by springs, and sometimes those springs are missing, and it might be worth asking the seller before you buy it, if you're doing it on Buy It Now, to check that the chuck is working effectively, and the jaws should open and shut by turning the outside casing of it. But that is about 10 quid on eBay, buy it now, and you'd probably spend more than that on a horrible plastic equivalent that wouldn't be nearly as good a product. Well, we're on the last lap now, and in the last part of the video I'm going to go through all the tools that you're going to use on the course bit by bit, showing you what they are and what we're going to use them for. And between you and me, it goes on a bit, and to save you time I've put a freeze frame at the beginning of that section that you can then print out, and you can come back and look at that at another time. Now, I won't be back wearing this wonderful shirt again in this video. So I'd like to ask you to do three things. Firstly, if you're going to start the course, please make sure that you enjoy it. It should be enjoyable, and as soon as you stop enjoying what you're doing, for goodness sake, leave your workmate, go and make a cup of tea, and come back to it another time when things will inevitably seem much rosier. The second thing is, if you've liked the video, the only way people will know this video is any good is if you put a thumbs up. So if you can give me a thumbs up, that's great, and that will encourage people to have a look at it. And lastly, if you would like to subscribe to my channel, and I'm sure you would, there is a little red button at the bottom that you can press, and that way you'll get the updates for everything I do on living room woodwork courses from now on. Well, thanks for watching, and good luck with the next session. I'm filming this having completed the project, so I got a pretty good idea of the range of tools that I needed, and I've separated them into those that are woodworking essentials and those that are specific to this project. And it might be that you buy them or get hold of them in that order. The first thing you'll need, which is the most difficult thing, is a number 5 plane. Number 5 rather than number 4, because it's got a lot of weight behind it, and you'll find the process of planing easier if you get a number 5. You can get these on eBay for about 40 quid, and whether it's a Stanley or a Record, it doesn't really matter, but I'd stick to those two makes if you're buying a second-hand plane, and have a good look at the reputation of the seller. And the things to look out for when you're buying a plane are that the lever cap has got the same name as the blade of the plane, which has got the same name as the body of the plane on the front here. If all those three things match, the chances are that the plane hasn't been messed about with too much. It's not an amalgam of different planes like this one, although this works really well. If you're buying your first plane, I'd try and make sure that it's one that's got integrity to it, i.e. all the bits are the same. It doesn't matter whether it's blunt, we're going to sharpen them anyway, as long as it's got all the bits, and do a little bit of research into what you need to look for when you're buying a plane. But I'd say eBay, a number 5 Record or Stanley, about 40 quid. You'll need a wheel brace, because we're not going to be using any power tools in this project. The thing to look out for those are that they've got 2 sets of gears, one gear here, one gear here, that stops this bit rattling. Again, a Stanley's a good make. You'll need a back saw, which looks like that. Spear & Jackson is a good make, they're available still. This is a B23. Whether it's a tendon saw or a dovetail saw, not too fussed about that, as long as it's a back saw and you can saw accurately with it and it's sharp. You'll need 2 chisels. You need a 1/2 inch or 12.5mm and a 25mm or 1 inch. You should get hold of a combination gauge. This is a combination of a marking gauge with a single spur on one side and an adjustable double spur on the other. You'll need a sharp craft knife of some kind. A Stanley knife is fine, it's a bit like using a telegraph pole, but Stanley knives I've used all my life. This is a smaller version of a Stanley knife. Your Workmate should have all these little widgets that go on top. So you need 4 of those, 2 pairs of those, otherwise you won't be able to hold the material into the Workmate properly. You can get those online if the Workmate you've got hold of has lost those. You'll need an engineer's tri-square. You can use a woodworker's tri-square, there's nothing wrong with that, but I find these are just about the right size for the purpose. They're dead accurate and very easy to handle. You'll need a steel rule. We're going to be marking up to 0.1 of a millimetre accuracy, and you won't be able to do it unless you have a really good steel rule. You'll need a really good pencil sharpener. I know it sounds nuts to say that, but a really sharp pencil sharpener is going to mean you're going to have a really sharp pencil all the time. And if you haven't got a really sharp pencil, one that hurts when you stab it in the back of your hand, then your marking out's going to be rubbish and your woodwork's going to follow suit. Those are the essentials that you need. Now for some tools that are specific to this particular project. You'll probably find it useful to get hold of one of these. This will be useful because you need to saw along the grain, and a back saw, although it will do it, is not quite as easy to use as something like this. You'll also need to get over the problem of these nasty screw nails that are holding your pallet together. They have a screw on, and consequently when you try and pull them out with a hammer, they want to rotate and they won't come out very easily. So as well as a hammer and a screwdriver that I used initially to try and get my pallet apart, to separate the boards and to eventually get the nails out, I suggest what you do is to buy yourself a thing called a wrecker bar. I ended up using that. If you have a look at the next session you'll see it. Because the wrecker bar is designed to do exactly what we're trying to do. The only disadvantage is that its chisel edge is quite narrow, it's about 25 millimeters, which means that when you lever the board away from the backing block, there's a tendency for the pallet board to split, and a lot of the trouble that I got into in the second session was to do with those boards splitting. If I had my time over again, I think what I'd do is to buy a thing called a brick bolster. If you drive that between the board and the backing block, it'll expose the nail shaft, and you can then get a hacksaw blade in there and saw through the nails rather than pulling them out. If I was doing this again, and I don't think I ever will be doing this again, I would get a hacksaw blade, I would work out which way the teeth were pointing, and I'd have the teeth pointing towards me. I'd wrap some gaffer tape around the blade, and I would use it to get through those very wicked little nails. You will need to sharpen your tools, and to do that properly you'll need an oil stone. Now I've had a lot of trouble with oil stones over the years, and I always go back to an India oil stone. It's two-sided, it's got a fine side and a coarse side. It's not cheap, but it's something that's going to last you for your woodworking career, and believe me, having a sharp tool is well worth the investment in a decent oil stone. In conjunction with that, and these aren't that expensive, I think they're about £7, you need to get hold of a Draper honing guide. That sets your plane blade or your chisel up at the right angle to get the sharpness that you need on the edge. If you want to go to the nth degree to get your chisel sharp, and you might want to, you'll need to do a bit of skip looking to find yourself some MDF or something similar. That 6mm flat material is what you're after. We'll be using this also in the course to lift up our wood in our Workmate so that we're not planing on top of our little orange bits I showed you earlier. You'll need some leather, and I use an old leather handbag, and I use double-sided tape to stick the leather to that flat surface. And then you'll need to buy this material, which is polishing soap and is available online. And although it's not essential, I would suggest you think about getting those elements because it changes your razor sharp blade to a beautifully razor sharp blade that will work so well for you. It's worth, I think, the extra investment. You will have to buy one of these because we need to hold the carcass together while the glue dries. It's a thing called a forgotten. It's a thing called a band clamp, B-A-N-D as in brass band clamp. To go with that, I'm trying to save you money because what you'd normally have to buy are either sash clamps or those clicky, plasticky clamps that you can get, which are reasonably expensive. Maybe you don't want to invest in that yet. So using one of those will be fine. In conjunction with that, I'd try and get hold of of these picture framing clamps. You'll be needing to drive pins into your wood, and for that you'll need a pin hammer. I really would invest in that rather than using the hammer that you use to get the pallet apart. It's light and it's accurate and it's so useful when you've got really thin pins and you don't want to bend them over. So a pin hammer, again, worth looking on eBay for, I reckon. That wheel brace, because nobody uses them, they use power tools obviously, is about 10 quid. I've just had a look, 10 quid, you can get one of those by it now, a wheel brace. This you could probably get for probably 4 quid, something like that, 3 quid on eBay. I'd get one. Something you might want to buy rather than go on eBay is a scriber. That's just like a stick of metal with a pointy end on it. You could use a nail if you wanted to, but it's quite nice to have the right tool. So a scriber, we use that for indenting the wood before we put the pins in to get the pin in the right position. And you'll also need a pin punch. You can recognise pin punch because it's got a flat point to it, and right in the middle of the point, I don't know whether you can see, it's got a little dimple that actually sits on top of the pin head. Towards the end of the project, you'll need some 320 grit and 120 grit glass paper. Worth buying this grey stuff. I'll hold that there long enough for you to see what that particular make is, but I would get a quality glass paper because it doesn't clog up very easily, and it lasts longer, stays sharper longer. And in conjunction with that, you'll need a cork block, because whenever we use glass paper we have a flat surface against it, so that we're transferring the flat surface of the block onto the wood. An eraser's not a bad idea. I spent my whole teaching career telling kids you shouldn't use a rubber on wood, you just sand it out, and I was so wrong. It's so easy to rub out pencil on wood, and I would do that favour to yourself, get an eraser. To go with your India oilstone, you'll need some 3-in-1 oil. We're going to be making a bench hook during the first stages of our project, and the reason we're doing that is because they're dead useful for sawing onto. It means that your Workmate doesn't get damaged, but they'll also give you a bit of experience of using your woodworking tools before you start on your spice rack, and that requires this, which is a countersink bit, which enables you to sink in the screw heads so that they're flush with the top of this stop that you're going to put on there. We're nearly at the end now. You'll need some drill bits, and the two particularly that you'll need is a 3.5mm high-speed steel twist drill and a 1mm high-speed steel twist drill to put in your wheel brace. And to do your screws up with, you will need 2 cross-headed screwdrivers, one that size and one in comparison that size. So you want to have those handy too. Anything else left in my little tray? Oh yes, if you're having barbecues, save a couple of those barbecue skewers. We're going to use those to fill the holes where the nails came out. If you're going to have a coffee between now and when you start, save the coffee stirrer because that's dead good for spreading the glue. And if you have gone on to home delivery rather than using your club card, you could just chop that up, and that makes a really good spreader because we're going to be mixing sawdust and glue to fill in the gaps in our wood. So those are all the tools that you'll need. In the next session you can watch me taking the pallets apart, not a pretty sight. My only excuse is that I've never done it before. And from then on, everything that you see will be as it happened. And when I started, I had no idea I was going to succeed. So I really hope you enjoy watching my journey, and more than that, I really hope that you give it a go yourself.